Sandy Leong. I'm an associate trainer with the Director of Social Change, and I'm delivering this session, Making Better Decisions, the Art of Critical Thinking, as part of the Espresso Express online learning support. Now, critical thinking is about having the skills to analyze information. It provides you with the skills to evaluate and analyze information so that you're able to obtain the greatest amount of knowledge from it in order, of course, to make good decisions. Critical thinking, if it's done well, allows us to separate ourselves from the events that are in front of us. And it permits us to look at a situation objectively, but both logically and creatively to come up with the best decision. So by developing our critical thinking skills, we can do this with more confidence because we know we've explored all the options when we're looking to come to the best decision. So critical thinking is about using different thinking to solve a problem and make a decision. And there's three different types of thinking involved in the umbrella of critical thinking. So there's logical thinking, lateral thinking, and creative thinking. It's also about not making assumptions, about checking out what words that have been spoken by ourselves and others really mean. Really importantly, understanding the difference between fact and opinion and remembering the difference between fact and opinion. So let's have a look at logical thinking. Well, when we're using logical thinking, we want factual statements. We want rules for deriving valid conclusions for where we're going. And it's a step-by-step process that builds on. Each step builds on the other. Once we've got the facts, we move on to the next part of the process. So problems or situations that involve logical thinking need a structure. This relationship between facts and the need for it all to make sense as it goes along. So we're always looking for data that makes sense that we can build on. I've talked about facts or opinion. Now just have a look at some of these statements that I've put up here and look to see whether they are facts or opinion. Deserts are not as beautiful as forests. Well, obviously it's a matter of opinion, isn't it? But people state these things as if they're facts. And sometimes you have to unpick it and you think, is that their view or is this the world view or is it a fact? What about Madrid is the capital of Spain? Well, that is obviously a fact, isn't it? Blue is an attractive colour. Again, there has to be an opinion. My aunt is the funniest person I know. She was actually. It's opinion, and that is my opinion. England is an island. Now, this is where it becomes interesting. Did you answer yes to that or no to it? What were you thinking? What were you thinking when I made the statement, England is an island? Actually, what this is about is how we use language. We often slip into lazy ways of doing things and use language that isn't really correct, but it is in our head. So did I mean England was an island? Did I mean Great Britain is an island? Because England isn't an island, is it? So that would be opinion. Well, it would just be wrong, really, wouldn't it? And so you think about how we use language and sometimes the sloppy way we use language. Leftover spaghetti is delicious. I'd like to do a hands up on that and see how many people agree with it. But it is, in essence, an opinion, not a fact, isn't it? And the last one's interesting as well. February is the shortest month. I think most of us will go, yeah, it is 28 days. Well, it's 29 this year, but it's the shortest month. We learnt that at school. But if you're looking at using critical thinking, you would need to ask another question before you can decide whether that's fact or opinion. The shortest month for what? It is the shortest in the 12 months. But is it the shortest for daylight hours? What is it shortest for? And so before we can answer that, we need to ask another question. And so we can easily confuse opinion for fact, especially if the statement agrees with our beliefs. And so we have to remember that a fact is something that can be proven. An opinion is knowledge based on feelings about a certain topic. And part of critical thinking is asking the right questions. Are we asking for facts or opinions? And we must remember what we'd asked for when we hear the answers and filter them accordingly. The other thing to look at in critical thinking is what we call belief bias, because problems can occur because people have trouble separating what's valid from what is true because of their own personal beliefs. And beliefs bias occurs when an individual's belief system interferes with their ability to come to a logical conclusion. It's this idea that we can't see beyond it. We believe that's the way it is, the way it should be, and it's difficult to see beyond it. Um, and also, part of that is confirmation bias. This is when we seek out information that supports what we believe and what we think should happen before all options have been explored. And sometimes we can seek people out who think the same way as us because it's going to be easier to get to the decision, the answer that we want. So that's something else to keep in mind. So the other type of thinking is lateral thinking. Lateral thinking is a way of solving problems using an indirect and creative approach, usually via reasoning that's not immediately obvious. It's definitely not linear, it's not logical thinking where we go from one step to the other. We have to go sideways with lateral thinking because it involves ideas that may not be obtainable using that step by step logic. So have a look at these then. Lateral thinking, I am sure you've come across these before. So this is about an accident. A baby falls out of a 20-story building onto the ground and lives. And so the question is, how? Surely they're going to be really injured if still alive at all. Can you work it out? Do you know the answer already? Well, if you look at it, it doesn't actually say which floor the baby fell from. So as they aren't hurt, then it was probably a ground floor window that they fell from. We make assumptions that out of there looking at it, it says 20-story building, so our mind goes high-rise building. And the next one, learning to drive, a girl who is just learning to drive went down a one-way street in the wrong direction, but didn't break the law. Again, do you know what the answer is? Again, there's some information missing from this. We hear learning to drive, so that resonates in our brain. Then we hear one-way street, and then we make an assumption that she must have broken the law, because if you drive down a one-way street the wrong way, then you've broken the law. It's as simple as that. But there's information missing there. We latch on to the learning to drive. The answer is she was probably walking. She could have been roller skating. We don't know. And so when we're looking at lateral thinking, we have to look at what isn't there to actually try and solve the problem. And then we've got creative thinking. And this really is the force that can move us forward. Because with logical thought, we analyse what is there. With creative thought, we contemplate what isn't there. It's that, thinking outside the box, turning what we know upside down, suspending judgment, and the need for an immediate answer. One of the simplest creative thinking techniques that you're all familiar with, I'm sure, is brainstorming. Done properly, it can bring up a whole range of different ideas to a particular problem. However, for brainstorming to be done properly, it has to be very clear at the beginning of the session that every thought, every idea, every word is written down, and there is no evaluation of what's been put on there, no matter how crazy or wacky or off the subject you think it is, that it has to be put on there, and then the evaluation comes after when the brainstorm's completed. So being a critical thinker means we use different ways of thinking. It means we're agile. If one fails to bring up a good solution, we can try out another one before we make the decision. And of course, once we've got all the information from our logical thinking, from our lateral thinking, or from our creative thinking, we have to organise the data, we have to organise the ideas, and make the connections that we can from what we've got. We also need to be self-aware. I've already talked about belief bias and confirmation bias, but this is just really to reinforce it. We have to be aware of our own feelings, prejudices, and opinions, because our assumptions are the first and the strongest filter through which we evaluate information. Just have a look at this picture now. Where do you think it is? Obviously, there's no clues, there's no signposts, there's no people, there's no boats or anything there. It is purely scenery. So ask that question. It's like, well, you could say, I don't know, but then I'd say, come on, I'm sure you can have a guess, because you can use the information that's stored in your head to have an educated guess on that. And so we use the information that we've got already to try and make a guess. Well, it could be the Lake Districts, it could be a lake in Scotland. It's actually Norway. I took this picture last year in Norway, down one of the fjords, in the time when we were allowed out. So a good critical thinker will have an open mind, will not always need to be right. So we're not driving the decision of what we're trying to make on the way down the line, so we feel that we are where we want it to go. But we're able to accept and see information in a way that's not filtered through our own ego. Critical thinkers use all their skills to solve problems, not just their intuition when making decisions and drawing conclusions from that. And so I think you can see the benefits of critical thinking. If we can develop those skills, it helps us to make better decisions, having explored all the options. And so it also, in the process, should make us a better listener and a better communicator, because we're thinking about what we're actually asking, and therefore being better at problem solving and decision making. Well, thank you for watching me, Sandy Leong. I'm from the DSC, for tuning in to our Espresso Express. Share it with others and have a look out for further information and resources here. You can see the information in front of you now.